technology. Bruno. So, Bruno Lafont, co-chairman of the board of directors of LafargeHolcim. Thank you, Bruno.
So thank you very much for the invitation. I'll try to be brief and to take the focus on the companies, and then to try to give you some examples about cooperation between governments and companies, and link that with the topic of ethics and also the topic of technologies. So, and I think we need to be very practical. I will not talk about the relation between governments and companies about the day-to-day life. I want to focus on the 2 or 3 global transformations which are happening. So everyone talked about globalization. There is another thing which is happening, which is climate change, which is an enormous transformation. The third one is urbanization. Urbanization will be an enormous change in the world in the coming years, and especially in new countries or in new growing countries. And the last point is digitalization. So thanks, I think, those big challenges, the cooperation between governments and companies, at least large companies, has improved in the last 3 to 5 years. I will just give you one example. At Copenhagen, it was in 2008, the companies had no right to enter, the debate place. They were localized 80 kilometers away from the negotiators. In Paris, they were 80 meters from the negotiators. So as close to the negotiators as to the NGOs. And what this contributed was the fact that the Paris Agreement mentioned the carbon pricing as one of the very good ways to accelerate the change relative to climate change and how to get this temperature increase less than 2%. And that is engaging a dynamic which has been created by 200, 300, 400 motivated large international companies which were listened, and not only once, but at several occasions during the process. And that has continued until Marrakesh, where I was last week, and we see that companies are there. Why? Because the transformation is something which is not simple, and I'm talking about the economical transformation or the transformation which have an economical impact. Why? Because in general, companies will play a very important role for the execution of the transformation. It was true for globalization. It is true for climate change. Without companies, there will be no technologies. There will be no new ways to build buildings, no new ways to invent the new car of the future, and so on. So that requires a lot of cooperation between governments and companies, and that is happening. That doesn't mean that everything is going well, and that doesn't mean that everything cannot be improved. Many things can be improved. I will give you several examples. Relative to urbanization, I think, and that is a question of governance, we should think about the way to simplify some organizations, some state organizations. About companies, I think they need really to think about the way they are addressing their propositions, the way they are cooperating between themselves in order to address propositions which are taking into account not just the interest of our companies, but the interest of the subject and the transformation. And I think there we need to improve a lot. And I think we need to improve a lot to measure. And measure, there I'm coming back, or I'm approaching the ethical question. Transformation means change. Change means talking about things we don't know all. We don't know all the future of everything, but we can talk a lot. And if we don't measure, and if we don't commit ourselves, and if we don't verify what we have done versus what we have announced, then we have a problem. And I think the responsibility of companies, like the responsibility of governments, and that is another example of the Paris Agreement, start with announcing commitments and also announcing the way on how we will measure. And there, since I see an improvement possible in the cooperation between states and companies, I think there are some dangers. And one of the dangers is that people, very often they are represented by NGOs, can say or can think that states and governments and companies are working together at the cost of the people. And that may explain some of the discussions we had before about some elections. But it's true that if we want to achieve those transformations, to create wealth as companies, and to fulfill a vision as a government, as a country, we need also to measure and to make sure that nobody is left aside, without job, without understanding the new technology, without understanding the future. And there, I will not enter the discussion, are the companies, missions to create just profit or more? I think they need to do more if they want to achieve profit, and they need to measure better. There is one interesting topic which is not very often spoken about, which is the common interest, the general interest. Are we all working towards a general interest? That's nice to talk. The question is how to measure our contribution to the general interest. How a company can produce a type of P&L or balance sheet showing not just what the profits and cash flows of the companies are, but the contribution in value of what a company does for the society, and not just for the society very close to it, but in more general terms. We have started in the World Business Council for Sustainable Development to talk about it. We call this redefining value. And I think it has a lot of merits, because if we are successful by doing that, I think we will be more transparent, we will be more responsible, we'll get new ideas, and we'll have also get new avenues, and also we accept to be under the scrutiny of the general opinion, the public opinion, and also on the scrutiny of the governments. And that is maybe a new way to practice ethics, and ethics not just being compliant to the rules, which is of course the basic, but also to contribute something to the society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Bruno, if you could please think about what the next 2 or 3 priorities, if you could articulate, you would like to see in terms of the cooperation that you mentioned early in your talk between business and government to pursue the general interest. I've been very unfair to you all because I've asked you complicated questions, and I'm only going to give you about a minute or 2 to answer them.